Well, Bob, you asked for a first-hand report on the March on Washington, and here it is before it gets cold. On Monday evening, August 26th, 500 bus captains left standing room only in the hall at St. Philip's Church in Harlem. We were treated to a rousing speech about the goals of the march and some stern warnings about the need to be thick-skinned towards hecklers and troublemakers. The warnings, fortunately, proved unnecessary. Blyden Jackson of the NAACP told us, "At no time will we on the national staff have any contact with the overwhelming majority of the people who are going to Washington. The only ones who will have access to them in terms of education and instruction are you, the bus and train captains. And we feel that it is absolutely essential that everyone who goes to Washington understands specifically why they are going there and what spirit we expect them to come with. The civil rights movement, as you all know, has been a nonviolent movement and will continue to be a nonviolent movement. But never before have we amassed such a huge number of people to take part in any kind of protest demonstration. Every person in your bus must understand that we are not going down to fight anyone who counterpickets us. We are not going down to answer the cry of nigger or any other insults, but we are going down to say that to the Barnetts and the Eastlands and to all of those people who would espouse the old conservative status quo way of thinking, that now is the time to change. The objective in Washington is not to fight back. It is not to be martyrs. It is not to take abuse and forget it. But it is to stand up as one voice, united with hundreds of thousands of other people, to say that in America there is a new way of thinking, and that all you people who stand for the old way must understand that we will go to the streets again and again, as we have before, and our numbers will build and build. But we are here, and you must make your people understand that we are going there because we believe that we do want freedom now." We gathered shortly after 4 a.m., August 28th, and grew anxious as the scheduled departure time of 4:30 approached, and our buses hadn't arrived. Several luxurious air-conditioned buses passed, and then 3 very rickety-looking school buses came along. We were relieved when they too passed us by. Our buses were new transit buses from New Haven, Connecticut. They weren't air-conditioned, nor did they have lean-back seats, but on the whole they were quite comfortable. As we loaded, I checked the names of my 44 passengers, who included Lois Diamond, a close friend of Rima's, who came on Rima's ticket because the doctor put the kibosh on Rima's going, Chessie Winston, a college friend, who was best man at our wedding, Georgie Shack, wife of a graduate school friend of mine, and Bob Krebs. Our group, the West Side Committee for Civil Rights, had 4 buses. 3 were filled with 44 people each, and the last had a few empty seats because of last-minute cancellations. Our riders included large delegations from the Church of the Good Shepherd, from St. James Episcopal Church, from Young Israel of the West Side, and many other groups. Actually, we had turned away enough people for several more loads because we were unable to get the buses. We managed to get some of them onto buses that other groups were sending. Enormous as the crowd was, it would have been far larger if everyone could have found transportation. A special bus stop was set up about 60 miles outside of New York on the New Jersey Turnpike. It included row upon row of temporary toilets called Johnny on the Spot. Despite these provisions, most buses found they had to make at least one more stop before reaching Washington. As it began to dawn, several Orthodox Jewish boys began their morning prayer ritual. The rest of us began to sing freedom songs to the accompaniment of my harmonica and Bob Krebs' Jew's harp. When it was fully light, we reviewed step by step the procedures for the day. At someone's suggestion, we arranged a buddy system. As we rightly expected, our efforts to stay together would be in vain. I passed on the word from the bus captain's meeting about being thick-skinned and pointed out everyone's responsibility to prevent this great demonstration from becoming a great tragedy. We read over the 10 demands of the march. 1. Comprehensive and effective civil rights legislation from the present Congress without compromise or filibuster to guarantee all Americans access to all public accommodations, decent housing, adequate and integrated education, the right to vote. 2. Withholding of federal funds from all programs in which discrimination exists. 3. Desegregation of all school districts in 1963. 4. Enforcement of the 14th Amendment, reducing congressional representation of states where citizens are disfranchised. 5. A new executive order banning discrimination in all housing supported by federal funds. 6. Authority for the Attorney General to institute injunctive suits when any constitutional right is violated. 7. A massive federal program to train and place all unemployed workers, Negro and white, on meaningful and dignified jobs at decent wages. 8. A national minimum wage act that will give all Americans a decent standard of living. 9. A broadened Fair Labor Standards Act to include all areas of employment which are presently excluded. 10. A federal Fair Employment Practices Act barring discrimination by federal, state, and municipal governments and by employers, contractors, employment agencies, and trade unions. As we approached Washington, the road became full of buses, big buses, little buses, air-conditioned buses, long-distance buses, school buses, old and new. Everyone waved as they passed one another. Somehow there was little delay and no real traffic jam. When we arrived, little children waved from almost every corner as we went through Washington. The police escorted us to a parking space, and we were told we were on Ohio Drive, Zone 2. We followed the crowd to the Washington Monument, where people were milling about, waiting for the march to begin. Someone's transistor radio announced that one of Lincoln Rockwell's men had been arrested, and that Mr. Rockwell and his henchmen had left. There was some confusion about how to get into the line of march, but we managed to stay together as a group, found the tent where placards were handed out, and quite appropriately, as the West Side Civil Rights Committee, we fell in line just in front of the Lower East Side Civil Rights Committee. We were off down Constitution Avenue singing. The march was slow and uneventful, except for a growing sense of joy in belonging to this momentous occasion. I tried to take some pictures, but was distracted by my own efforts to be sure our group stayed together. Some bus captain I turned out to be. I lost the whole crew as we went over the hill just before coming to the reflecting pool. I even lost my buddy, Rima's friend Lois. What's more, she had lunch for us both. Then I saw Tuvia Bayless. How could I miss him? Beard, yarmulke, black suit, and a knapsack on his back. He too had lost our group, and he had lunch for several people, which he shared with me. He's very idealistic and annoyed because the Board of Orthodox Rabbis is, as he put it, so far behind the people. They had avoided endorsing the march until the last minute. I never found out what Tuvia's lost companions did for food. In any case, even after we found most of the group, they couldn't have shared any of what Rima had packed for me. It wasn't kosher. The afternoon was, fortunately, not too hot, and we remained fairly comfortable under the trees. A group who had walked from New York passed close to where we were standing, and Tuvia managed to get a picture just as they lifted up a 3-year-old child who had made the trip with them. I saw a sign that said, "The Washington Interracial Couples Club naturally wants justice now." From time to time, people passed, selling a newspaper put out by William Worthy's newly announced Freedom Now party. I noticed they were all white. There were few takers. One approached us, and we both said no thank you. He turned to Tuvia and said sarcastically, "It's printed in Hebrew." Tuvia said, "Double, no thank you." The crowd, about one-third white, listened intently to the speeches whenever they were within hearing range. After Martin Luther King, I felt Walter Reuther and Rabbi Joachim Prince were most moving. There was no pushing or shoving. I didn't hear a cross word all day. The trash baskets were full to overflowing. Few left garbage behind, but when anyone did, someone else would pick it up and carry it to the nearest trash can. When the crowd left, only the placards they had carried were left behind as litter. Even these were being cleaned up as we waited for those who had to use the Johnny on the spot. When those of us who had regrouped returned to the bus, we were surprised to find it was on West Basin Drive rather than Ohio Drive as we had been told by the police. Actually, this didn't delay us much because we had to wait for our driver, who, according to law, must have an 8-hour break between trips as long as the New York to Washington run. By the time the driver came, all had found the bus. As we were about to leave, we picked up 2 strays who had lost their bus. However, the police routed all buses to a central lost and found depot, and with almost no delay, we transferred the 2 to their own bus. The only bickering of the trip came after we had stopped to refuel the bus and take care of other needs, over whether we should try to complete the trip without another stop. At length, the hungry ones were voted down, and 2.5 hours later, we arrived in New York, exhausted but still floating on Martin Luther King's dream. A few days later, we received the following letter from Lois. Dear Rima and Eric, I'm still floating from that glorious, beautiful experience. I am so in love with all the great and sweet people in the world, all of whom were there Wednesday, and feel that with good purpose and motivation, people have it in them to be so great and wonderful, if only this motivation can be as strongly felt by all the world's people. Or am I dreaming? I'm so numb from fatigue and so excited thinking about Wednesday. And now, for the rest of my life, I will glow at the mention of Wednesday or the number 28. I'm so proud of all those wonderful people, so proud of all those weak-kidneyed, food-stuffing nuts. Rima, you should be very proud of your captain husband, Mother Hen Eric, and just remember that there will be other marches, and they will be as inspiring for you as this one was for us. And you played such an important part in this one, more so than you probably realize, and deserve more credit for doing it, for most people as pregnant as you would have begged off. As you and Betsy will remember, Bob, Rima took care of the headquarters of the West Side Committee for the 2 weeks immediately preceding the march. News reports have said that the march was orderly or peaceful, or that there was a picnic spirit, but none of this quite catches the feeling of the day. 1 out of every 700 adult Americans gave up their time, their money, or both to be there, and the feeling of dedication and of brotherhood among them is difficult to capture in words. They were polite and orderly, certainly, but they were more than that. They were considerate and genuinely concerned. They were happy, not with the enjoyment of an outing, but rather with the inspiration of participation in a great cooperative endeavor and growing confidence that we shall overcome.